You can have a wedding anytime. Tessa, this is my first baby. That's what my sister said 6 weeks before I walked down the aisle, in a garden filled with empty chairs. She said it casually, like she was picking between coffee shops, like my wedding day was flexible, optional, something I could just move. So she booked her baby shower on the exact same day, same hour. And one by one, my entire family chose her. My mom, my aunts, my cousins, even my dad, the man who once held my hands and promised he'd walk me down the aisle. He chose finger sandwiches and champagne at a private club, over his own daughter's wedding vows. 7 people showed up to my wedding. 417 messages showed up after they saw what they missed. But I'll get to that. Before we go on, take a moment to subscribe, but only if you truly believe that family are the ones who will always be there when needed. And tell me, where are you listening from? And what time is it there? This is a fictional story inspired by real-life family situations, with a little help from AI to bring it to life. Now I'll tell you more details. My name is Tessa Cole. I'm 29 years old. And to understand how everything fell apart, I need to take you back 6 months before my wedding, to a Thanksgiving dinner where my father looked my fiancé in the eye and told him he would never amount to anything. In the Cole family, there was one rule nobody ever said out loud. Everything revolved around my older sister, Vanessa Cole. My father, Thomas Cole, spent over 3 decades as a senior manager at a regional bank in Burlington, Connecticut. Reliable, predictable, the kind of man who wore the same watches, the same suits, and called it discipline. My mother, Elaine Cole, stayed home. She hosted charity luncheons, book clubs, and made sure our house in West Hartford always looked perfect. White siding, black shutters, fresh flowers lining the walkway. From the outside, we looked like the kind of family people admired. From the inside, it was very different. Vanessa married Caleb Rhodes 5 years ago. The Rhodes family owns a commercial development firm across southern Connecticut. Or at least, they did back then. At the time, Caleb was everything my parents admired: wealthy, confident, connected. He bought Vanessa a brand new Range Rover, a diamond bracelet from Tiffany, and more importantly, he bought my parents' loyalty. He covered their mortgage, funded their kitchen remodel, handed my mother a credit card she never had to think twice about using. And in return, my entire family treated Vanessa like she had won some invisible competition no one else was allowed to enter. She hasn't worked a single day in 6 years. She calls herself an event consultant. I've never seen a single event, but in my family, marrying rich was the same thing as being successful. And then, there was me, Tessa, the younger daughter, the one who worked as a freelance illustrator, children's books, editorial sketches, quiet projects that didn't come with titles or offices or business cards, the one living in a rented studio apartment in New Haven, with paint-stained counters and a couch I bought secondhand. I never hated Vanessa for marrying into money. I hated what it did to me. It made me invisible. I met Ethan Blake 3 years ago at a small art fair in New Haven. He was standing in front of one of his paintings, an oil piece of a woman sitting on a fire escape. Sunlight caught in her hair, and he was staring at it like it had personally offended him. I laughed. He turned, and something about the way he looked at the world made me stop. Ethan is a contemporary realist painter. He works in oils, portraits, city scenes, quiet moments most people overlook. The kind of talent people in the art world call rare, and my family calls not a real job. He sold pieces through small galleries, took commissions when they came. Some months were good. Some months, we lived on pasta and cheap wine, but we were building something real, something honest. And to me, That mattered more than money ever could. My family never understood that, and they never even tried. Thanksgiving, 8 months before the wedding. I brought Ethan to my parents' house in West Hartford for dinner. Vanessa arrived 10 minutes late in a brand new Range Rover, carrying 2 bottles of Napa Valley Cabernet, $200 each, she said as she walked in. Just loud enough for everyone to hear. I brought a pie. Apple. From scratch. I'd spent 2 hours making it that morning. My mother took the wine from Vanessa with both hands, like it was something sacred. She placed it carefully in the center of the table. She didn't mention the pie. Dinner started the way it always did. Polite, controlled, performative. Halfway through, my father leaned toward Ethan with that familiar smile, the one that looks friendly from a distance but never quite reaches his eyes. "So, Ethan," he said, slicing into his turkey. "When are you planning to get a real job?" Caleb laughed from across the table, not even trying to hide it. Vanessa tilted her head slightly, studying me like I was something fragile. "Well," she said softly, "at least Tessa has someone." Her voice was soaked in pity. Ethan didn't respond. He didn't defend himself. He didn't argue. He just reached under the table and squeezed my hand. That was who he was. Quiet, steady, unshakable. What no one at that table knew, what I barely understood myself, was that Ethan had just finished a large painting for a new client. A client introduced by our landlord. I didn't ask questions at the time. I didn't think it mattered. It would turn out to be the most important thing that had ever happened to us. Our landlord, Mr. Leonard Hayes, was the kind of man most people would walk past without noticing. Late 60s, silver hair, always wearing the same worn corduroy jacket. He drank black coffee from an old chipped mug that said Soho, NYC. He owned the old Victorian building on Elm Street in New Haven, where Ethan and I rented the ground floor studio. $800 a month, 12-foot ceilings, north-facing windows, enough space to live and work. It was absurdly cheap. When I asked him why, he just shrugged. "I prefer artists over accountants," he said once. No offense to accountants. To me, he was just kind. The man who let us pay rent late once without charging a fee. The man who brought fresh tomatoes from his garden every August. But Leonard had this habit. He would wander downstairs while Ethan was painting. He'd stand quietly near the easel, coffee in hand, watching. And then he'd say things like, "The light on the cheekbone. Push it warmer. Just a little." Ethan would adjust. And suddenly, the painting would come alive. One afternoon, Leonard said something I almost forgot. "Your work reminds me of someone I used to represent," he told Ethan. "He sells for 6 figures now." I smiled politely. I thought he was just being nice. Around that same time, Leonard mentioned that a friend of his wanted to see more of Ethan's work. He asked if Ethan could take photos of a few recent pieces and send them over. I assumed it was a small gallery, maybe a local collector. Nothing major. The world has a strange way of finding real talent. Leonard said to me one evening while I was washing brushes in the sink, "It just takes longer when you're honest about it." I nodded. Then I went back to worrying about seating charts and flower arrangements. I should have asked more questions. In January, Ethan proposed. No ring at first. Just a quiet question, spoken while we were lying on the studio floor, surrounded by half-finished canvases, snow falling outside the window. Later, he carved a ring for me himself. Walnut wood. Smooth. Simple. It was the most beautiful thing anyone had ever given me. I called my parents that weekend. We had already chosen the date, June 14th, a small garden ceremony near Mystic, Connecticut. Nothing extravagant. 42 guests, wildflowers, an arch Ethan was building by hand from reclaimed wood. My father's first response wasn't congratulations. June 14th, he said. Let me check. Let me check. 2 days later, he called back. I'll be there. Sweetheart, he said. I'll walk you down the aisle. I promise. I held on to those words like they were something fragile. Like if I wasn't careful, they would break. My mother's reaction was different. That's nice. Honey, she said. How much is it costing? She didn't ask about my dress. She didn't ask about the flowers. She didn't ask if I was happy. Vanessa sent a text. Just one. Congrats. Let me know if you need help. And then, nothing. No call. No follow-up. No offers to plan. Or taste cakes. Or visit venues. From someone who called herself an event consultant. The silence was loud. So Ethan and I did everything ourselves. I designed the invitations by hand. Watercolor wildflowers on cream cardstock. Each one slightly different. I thought about Vanessa's wedding 5 years ago. 300 guests. Gold foil invitations. A live band. But I loved ours. They were real. They were ours. Looking back now, I should have known something was wrong, because for the first time in her life, Vanessa had no opinion about my wedding date. And silence from her was never a good sign. Vanessa had an opinion about everything. The dress, the venue, the guest list, even the shade of flowers I chose. But this time, she said nothing. And that silence sat in the back of my mind like a warning I didn't fully understand yet. 3 weeks before the wedding. My phone rang while I was standing in the studio kitchen, rinsing brushes in the sink. It was my aunt, Margaret, my mom's older sister, the one who always knew everything before anyone else. Tessa. Honey, she said, her voice light, almost casual. Are you going to Vanessa's shower too? Or just the wedding? They're the same day. Right. I froze. A streak of turquoise paint slipped from the brush in my hand and dripped onto the floor. What shower? I asked. There was a pause. The baby shower, she said. June 14th. At the club in Greenwich. Didn't you get the invitation? No. I hadn't. I hung up and immediately called Vanessa. She picked up on the third ring. Oh my God. Tessa, she said, her voice bright, polished, practiced. I was just about to call you. I didn't speak. I didn't realize the venue Caleb booked only had June 14th available. She continued quickly. It's a whole situation with the caterer and the rentals. I can't change it now. I closed my eyes. But your wedding is in the afternoon. Right, she added. Maybe people can do both. My wedding was at 3 in the afternoon in Mystic. Her baby shower was at noon in Greenwich, at least an hour and a half apart. Without traffic, no one could do both. She knew that. I knew that. Even the simplest map could tell you that. She went on describing it anyway. Valet parking, a private club, catering from a French restaurant in Stamford. Customized gift bags at every seat. She spoke like she was describing something inevitable. Like weather, like gravity, like this had just happened. But something settled in my chest while she talked. Heavy. Sharp. When I called Aunt Margaret back, she confirmed what I was already beginning to understand. Vanessa had sent out her baby shower invitations 2 weeks before I mailed my save the dates. 2 weeks. She had known my wedding date for months, and she chose that day anyway. I'm so sorry. Tessa, Vanessa said, her voice soft, almost sweet. But this is my first baby. You understand. Right. I didn't answer. You can have a wedding anytime. I hung up. I called my mother first. Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. You know my wedding is that day. There was a pause. The kind of pause that already contains the answer. I know. Honey, she said gently. But Vanessa really needs the family there. It's her first child. Your father and I. We can't miss that. I stared at the wall. Can you, maybe postpone? She added. Just a few weeks. I've already paid deposits. I said. They're non-refundable. Invitations have been sent? Well, maybe not everyone needs to be at both. She replied. Some people will go to hers, some to yours. Like it was a casual choice. Like my wedding was something people might drop into. If they had time. I ended the call. Then I called my father. He did what he always did when things got uncomfortable. He avoided. Let me talk to your mother, he said. We'll figure something out. He didn't call back for 3 days. I texted him. Dad, are you still walking me down the aisle? He read it. I saw the notification. No reply. I called again. And again. On the third try. He finally picked up. Of course, sweetheart. He said, I told you I would. But something in his voice felt hollow, like he was reading lines from a script he didn't believe in. That was the moment I felt it. Not a crack. A shift, like the ground beneath me had quietly moved. And I hadn't noticed until it was already too late. That week, I started counting the RSVPs. Out of 38 family members invited, 22 had already declined. Every single one of them going to Greenwich. I didn't beg. I didn't call them one by one. I asked once, clearly. And then I waited. Because I told myself their answer, the real answer, the one hidden behind polite excuses and scheduling conflicts, would tell me exactly where I stood. It did. Rachel was the one who showed me everything I hadn't seen yet. My best friend, an ER nurse who had no patience for lies, and even less for people who hid behind them. She had been added to our family group chat years ago, back when my mom thought it was nice to include my friends. No one ever removed her. And because Rachel was Rachel, she took screenshots. One evening, she sat me down in the studio and laid everything out. Vanessa hadn't just sent invitations. She had called every single family member individually. Not casually, not by accident, carefully, strategically, one by one, making sure they chose her. Rachel scrolled through the messages slowly, like she wanted me to see every word clearly. To your mom, she said, reading from one screenshot. Vanessa told her, if you go to Tessa's wedding instead, I'll feel like you don't care about your first grandchild. She swiped. To Aunt Margaret. Caleb's mother is coming. If our side of the family doesn't show up, it'll be embarrassing. Another swipe. And this one. Rachel hesitated for a second before turning the phone toward me. This one was in the group chat. I looked down. Dad. Tessa will understand. She's used to being disappointed. I read it again. She's used to being disappointed. My own sister had typed that out. Paused. And pressed send. But that wasn't even the worst part. The real reason sat underneath all of it. Unspoken. But obvious. Caleb paid my parents' mortgage. $3,200 a month. He had given my mother a credit card that covered groceries, clothes, salon visits, everything she didn't want to think about. My family wasn't just emotionally tied to Vanessa, they were financially dependent on her. Vanessa never said it out loud. She didn't need to. It lived in the way my mother defended her, in the way my father avoided conflict, in every quiet compromise they made. If you chose against her, the money stopped. And my parents couldn't afford that. Rachel showed me one last message. Honestly, Tessa's wedding is so small. It barely counts as an event. She's marrying a painter in a garden. It's not like there's a reception at some luxury hotel. I stared at the screen. Then I handed the phone back. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I just understood. That night, Ethan and I sat in the studio. The overhead light cast a warm glow across unfinished canvases, jars of turpentine, brushes left to dry. Outside, the sound of cicadas filled the air. Summer in New Haven always sounded like a constant hum that never quite stopped. Ethan stood at the sink, cleaning brushes. "We don't need them to make this real, Tessa," he said quietly. He didn't look at me when he said it. There was a pause. "But I know you want your dad there." I didn't answer right away. I was staring at a painting he had been working on, a single chair in an empty room, light pouring in through a window. It wasn't meant to be about me, but somehow, it was. That night, I wrote one final message, a group text to every family member I had invited. No guilt, no emotion, just the facts, the date, the time, the address, directions, and at the very end, one sentence. "I hope to see you there." I sent it at 10:47 p.m. I watched the screen for a while. Nothing. No replies. Not one. The next morning, my phone rang. Rachel. She was calling from Chicago. I booked a flight. She said immediately, "I'll be there." Her voice was steady, certain. "I'll always be there." She didn't ask who else was coming. She already knew. June 14th was 12 days away. I had a dress hanging in the closet, vintage lace, ivory. I found it in a small consignment shop near Mystic. A seamstress had altered it for $80 and told me I looked like Grace Kelly. I had flowers ordered from a local farm. I had 42 chairs set up in a garden. Everything was ready. Everything except one thing. I didn't have a single member of my family who chose me. What I didn't have anymore was the need to beg. And that was new. That was the first real shift. June 14th, 7 in the morning, the day of my wedding. Rachel sat cross-legged on the bathroom counter, leaning in close as she applied my makeup with what she called hospital-level precision. I stood still, trying to breathe normally. My dress hung on the closet door behind me, my bouquet, white peonies and lavender from a small farm in Stonington, rested in a mason jar on the kitchen table. Everything was quiet. Then my phone buzzed. I looked down. "Dad," I answered. Rachel didn't stop moving, but I saw her eyes flick toward me in the mirror. "Tessa, honey." His voice sounded thin, worn down. I don't really know how to say this. I closed my eyes. "Your mother and I. Vanessa's shower starts at noon. And with the drive. I don't think we can make it to Mystic by 3. 8 seconds. I counted them. 8 seconds of silence. That was all it took for something inside me to finally collapse. Every moment I had ever believed I mattered equally, every time I told myself he would show up when it counted, all of it. Gone. "You promised." I said. "I know." He replied quickly, "And I'm sorry. But this is Vanessa's first baby. There will be other moments." My voice didn't shake. "I'm proud of that. This is my only wedding day." I said, "There won't be another one." He exhaled. "Tessa, don't make this harder than it has to be." I ended the call. I placed the phone face down on the counter. My hands were trembling. My eyes were dry. Rachel didn't say anything. She just picked up the mascara wand and kept going. Later that morning, she checked Instagram. She turned the phone toward me without a word. Vanessa had already posted. Pink balloons, gold streamers, staff setting up tables at the venue. The caption read, "So grateful to have the whole family here." Posted at 9 in the morning, 3 hours before the shower even started. I didn't react. I didn't cry. I just thought, so this is what it feels like when the last thread breaks. The venue sat behind a small inn overlooking a salt marsh, where the water shimmered silver under the afternoon light. Ethan had spent 2 full weekends building the arch, reclaimed oak, sanded smooth, wrapped in fresh eucalyptus and white ribbon. It was simple. It was perfect. I arrived at 2:15. The chairs were already set. 42 of them. White linen, each one tied with a small bundle of lavender. From a distance, it looked like a painting. Up close, 35 of them were empty. 7 people. That was it. Ethan, Rachel, 2 of Ethan's friends from art school, a sculptor named Daniel and a printmaker named Iris. Mr. Leonard Hayes, dressed in a suit I had never seen him wear, and 2 of my college friends who had driven in from New York. 7 people in 42 chairs. The wind moved through the empty rows, brushing against the lavender like it was trying to fill the silence. I stood at the end of the aisle in my dress. Ivory lace, tea-length, vintage. The seamstress had been right. It fit like it was made for me. But standing there alone, no hand in mine, no father beside me, every empty chair felt like a bruise I couldn't hide. The music started. 2 girls from a nearby college, violin and cello, soft, steady, beautiful, and I took a breath, preparing to walk forward alone. If you think my family made the right choice choosing my sister's baby shower over my wedding, then comment reasonable. But if you feel that walking away from your own daughter on the most important day of her life is something you could never support, then comment heartless. Sometimes a single decision reveals everything about where you truly stand. And I want to know, what would you call it? Pachelbel's cannon began to play, the sound drifting softly across the marsh. Rachel stepped closer to me, her voice gentle. I can walk you down. I shook my head. No, I said quietly. You're my maid of honor. You belong up there with Ethan. I turned toward the aisle. Ethan stood at the other end, waiting. Even from that distance, I could see it. His eyes were red. I took a breath, preparing myself to walk alone. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, steady, intentional. I believe I might be overdressed for a garden wedding. I turned. Mr. Leonard Hayes stood a few feet away. He was wearing a navy 3-piece suit I had never seen before. Perfectly tailored, old, but carefully kept. A pale blue pocket square tucked neatly into the breast pocket. Silver cufflinks catching the afternoon light. Later, I would notice the engraving on them, but in that moment, all I saw was his expression. Calm, certain, present. If you'd allow an old man the honor, he said, extending his arm. Something inside me shifted, not a sharp break, something softer, like a space opening, and light finally finding its way in. I looked at him, our landlord, the quiet man who drank black coffee in our kitchen, the one who stood beside Ethan's easel and told him to adjust the light by half a degree. And suddenly, I understood something I hadn't before. He hadn't just been kind. He had been paying attention. He had been there. Mr. Hayes, you don't have to. I said. I know. He replied gently. I want to. His voice didn't waver. Your father should be here. He added. But since he isn't, someone who truly values you should be. I took his arm. And together, we walked. The 7 people sitting in those chairs stood as we passed. Rachel was already crying. Daniel and Iris were smiling. My friends from New York had their hands pressed over their mouths. And at the end of the aisle, Ethan. He lifted his hand to his face, trying to hold himself together. The ceremony lasted 12 minutes. Our efficient, A retired judge Ethan knew from a community art project. Kept it simple. We said our vows. Ethan had written his on a piece of primed canvas. I had written mine on the back of one of my illustrations. We both cried. We both laughed. 7 people clapped. And in that garden, under that soft June light, it was enough. More than enough, because in that moment, I realized something I had never fully understood before. My father had 30 years to show up for me. Mr. Hayes had known me for 2. And he was the one who stood beside me after the ceremony. We stayed in the garden. There was no ballroom, no DJ, no towering cake. We ordered pizza from a small place in downtown Mystic. Rachel opened 3 bottles of wine she had brought in her suitcase. Nothing expensive, just something she loved. Daniel connected his phone to a small speaker. Music filled the air as the sun dipped lower. We danced barefoot on the grass. We laughed. We stayed until the fireflies came out. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't what my family would have called impressive. But it was real. And for the first time that day, I felt something steady settle inside me. This was ours. When the music faded and Ethan was helping Daniel fold up the tables, I sat down on one of the empty chairs and picked up my phone. Nothing. No messages, not a single one, no congratulations, no apology, no, we're thinking of you, nothing. Like the day hadn't happened, like I hadn't happened. I opened Instagram. I knew I shouldn't, but I did. Vanessa had posted 14 photos. The private club in Greenwich, pink and gold balloons, a dessert table that probably cost more than my entire wedding, Aunt Margaret laughing with a glass of champagne, Uncle Robert holding a gift bag, and my father, standing beside Vanessa, his hand resting on her belly, smiling. The last photo was a selfie, Vanessa in the center, glowing, surrounded by the same faces I had invited to my wedding. The caption read, "Surrounded by love. Family is everything. Family is everything." She posted that while I was standing in front of 7 people and 35 empty chairs. I zoomed in on one of the photos, a group shot near the bar. Caleb stood off to the side, turned slightly away, phone pressed to his ear, his jaw tight. He looked stressed. It felt out of place in a room full of celebration. I noticed it. Then I let it go. That night, back in the studio, Ethan and I lay on the old futon that doubled as our couch. The windows were open. Crickets filled the air. We had taken the lavender from the chairs and placed them in small jars around the room. The scent lingered, soft and familiar, like the wedding had followed us home. Ethan stared at the ceiling, his fingers laced with mine. I married the most talented, most stubborn, most beautiful woman I've ever known, he said quietly. In a garden with 7 witnesses. He turned his head toward me, and I wouldn't trade it for a ballroom with 300. I tried to smile. I almost did. I keep thinking, I whispered. Maybe if I had tried harder, called one more time. You called enough. His voice was calm, certain, like a door closing gently, but completely. You called more than enough. Tessa, that was when it hit me. Not the sadness for myself, the sadness for him. Ethan had stood at the end of that aisle, watching his bride walk toward him with a 68-year-old landlord, because her own father chose not to come. He deserved better than that. You deserved a real wedding, I said softly. With a family there. He shook his head. This was a real wedding. Mr. Hayes was there. Rachel was there. He squeezed my hand. That's more family than blood gave you today. I cried then, quietly, into his shoulder. Not because I was broken, because I was tired. Tired of holding everything together by myself. What I didn't know then was that Ethan had been keeping something from me, something Mr. Hayes had helped him set in motion months ago. Something he didn't tell me because he didn't want our wedding day to become about money. Something that would change everything. Very soon. 1 week passed. Then another. Not a single message from my family. On the 8th day, I sent one final text. I read it 3 times before pressing send. Thank you for your silence. It told me everything your words never could. I won't be reaching out again. If you want to talk, you know where to find me. 2 days later, my mother replied, Tessa, don't be dramatic. We love you. Vanessa's shower was just bad timing. No apology, no acknowledgement. Just that word, dramatic. My family's favorite way to dismiss anything they didn't want to face. I didn't respond. I muted the group chat, and I turned my attention to the only thing that had never failed me, the work. Ethan was painting again. Something different. Something I hadn't seen from him before. He called the series The Seventh Chair. Large oil paintings. Quiet and heavy with meaning. A dinner table set for 8, with one chair slightly pulled back. Untouched. A church pew with a folded program resting alone at one end. A row of white chairs in a garden, lavender tied to each one. 35 of them, holding nothing but air. He never explained the series. He didn't need to. I already knew what they were about. One afternoon, Mr. Hayes came downstairs to see the new work. He stood in front of the garden painting for a long time. His coffee went cold in his hand. Then he pulled out his phone and typed something. He didn't say who he was messaging. I didn't ask. By then, I had stopped waiting for an apology that was never coming. I started building something else, a life that didn't need one. What I didn't realize was that something much bigger was already unfolding, and Mr. Hayes had been shaping it from the very beginning. 2 weeks after the wedding, he invited Ethan and me upstairs. Not casually, not the usual drop by if you want. A real invitation. When we arrived, there were 3 mugs on the table, a French press, and a cardboard box. Sit down, he said. There's something I should have told you a long time ago. He opened the box. Inside were exhibition catalogs, stacks of them, from a gallery in Chelsea, New York. There were magazine clippings from Art News and Art Forum, photographs of Mr. Hayes standing beside artists at gallery openings, artists I recognized from museum walls. I ran Hayes Gallery for 22 years, he said, placing one of the catalogs in front of me. The cover showed a painting I had seen in textbooks. I represented 43 artists. He continued. 7 of them are now in the Whitney's permanent collection. I stared at him. This quiet man. Our landlord. The one who charged us $800 a month and drank coffee from a chipped mug. You never told us, I said. You didn't need to know, he replied calmly. I needed to be sure about Ethan first. He folded his hands. I've spent my entire career learning the difference between good and exceptional. He looked directly at Ethan. Ethan is exceptional. Then he told us the rest. 6 months earlier. Before the engagement, before the wedding, before everything. He had sent photos of Ethan's work to a private collector, Daniel Ashford, a name that appeared in auction catalogs all over the world, a man whose collection included works worth millions. Daniel had purchased one painting immediately, $85,000. I turned to Ethan. He nodded slowly. And in that moment, I saw it. The secret he had been carrying. I was going to tell you after the wedding, he said quietly. I didn't want it to overshadow our day. Over the next few days, everything unfolded quickly. Daniel Ashford's attorney reached out with a formal proposal, a contract, 12 original paintings, 18 months, for his private collection, Total value $450,000. Every detail was outlined: payment schedule, ownership rights, insurance. It was the kind of opportunity artists wait their entire lives for. And somehow, it had been building quietly, while I was busy planning a wedding no one came to. It was the kind of contract artists dream about for decades and never actually see. Attached to it was another letter, from the director of Langford Gallery on West 25th Street in Manhattan, one of the most respected spaces for contemporary realism in the country. They were inviting Ethan to hold a solo exhibition. The centerpiece would be the Seventh Chair series. We drove to New York a few days later to sign everything at an attorney's office on Park Avenue. I sat in a leather chair, reading every page carefully. The numbers started to blur. My hands were shaking, not from fear. "This is more money than my dad made in 5 years," I said quietly. Mr. Hayes, who had come with us, rested his hand on the table. "And this is only the beginning," he said. "Daniel doesn't invest casually. He builds relationships. This will open every door Ethan chooses to walk through." Ethan signed. The attorney notarized the documents. That same afternoon, the gallery confirmed the exhibition timeline by email. It was real, every word of it. Official, legal, binding. And we didn't tell anyone. Not a single person. My family still believed Ethan was a struggling artist who relied on my freelance income to get by. They had no idea what was already changing. A week later, Daniel Ashford called Ethan directly. I was in the studio when Ethan answered, putting it on speaker without thinking. His hands were covered in paint. Daniel's voice was calm, measured, the kind of voice that never rushed for anything. "Ethan," he said, "I understand you and your wife didn't get the wedding trip you deserved." I glanced up. "My yacht, the Meridian, will be in Monaco next month," he continued. "I'd like you both to spend 10 days on board. Consider it a thank you for the first 3 paintings." The Meridian. I would later learn it was a 180-foot yacht that traveled the Mediterranean all summer, hosting artists, collectors, and curators. Ethan covered the phone slightly and looked at me. "We can't accept that," I whispered. He hesitated. "Mr. Hayes says this is how Daniel works," he said. "It's not charity. It's how he builds relationships." I thought about it. About the empty chairs. About my father choosing a baby shower over my wedding. About how many years I had spent making myself smaller, so other people could feel comfortable. Not anymore. I nodded. Yes. A few days later, Rachel found out. Her reaction was exactly what you'd expect. "You are going on a billionaire's yacht for your honeymoon," she said, laughing so hard she almost choked on her coffee. "And your family still thinks Ethan is broke." "They don't know," I said. "And I'm not telling them." I wasn't hiding anything. I just stopped explaining myself to people who never listened. While we were preparing for the trip, I started hearing small things, fragments. Aunt Margaret, the only one who still occasionally texted me, mentioned something in passing. Caleb's real estate company was starting to have problems. 2 of Caleb's biggest development projects collapsed. Funding disappeared. Deals fell through. I didn't know the full details, but I didn't need to. The signs were obvious. Vanessa's Range Rover was gone, replaced by a used Honda, and Vanessa, who used Instagram like breathing, went completely silent for 2 weeks. For her, that was a crisis. Then my phone rang. My mom. For the first time in over a month. "Hi, honey. How are you?" Her voice was unusually bright, forced. "I'm fine." A pause. "Well, your dad grilled last weekend. It was really nice. We were thinking maybe you and Ethan could come over this Sunday." I leaned against the studio wall. "I'm busy," Mom. Oh, okay. Another pause. Well, your dad says hi. I ended the call and stood there for a moment, phone still warm in my hand. I understood. When Caleb's money was flowing, I didn't exist. Now that it wasn't, suddenly they remembered they had another daughter. What none of them knew. What I didn't fully realize yet was that 3 weeks later, one photo would make Caleb's entire world look small. We packed quietly. I brought a small suitcase. Ethan packed his sketchbooks. We flew to Nice on a Tuesday morning in July, and when we stepped onto the Meridian, I finally understood something. This wasn't a yacht. It was a different world. Our cabin opened onto a private balcony overlooking water so blue it looked unreal. Marble floors, soft white sheets, fresh gardenias placed beside the bed. The first morning, I stood barefoot on the balcony in a simple linen dress I had bought at a street market. The coastline of Monaco drifted past slowly, like something painted. On the third evening, Daniel hosted dinner on the upper deck. 8 guests, collectors, a curator, an art critic from Berlin, crystal glasses, white linen, candlelight flickering as the sky shifted from orange to deep blue. Daniel raised his glass. "I'd like to introduce Ethan Blake," he said, "the most compelling realist painter I've seen in 20 years." I felt Ethan's hand tighten slightly around mine. He spoke quietly. No performance. Just truth. About absence. About empty spaces left behind by people who chose not to show up. The Berlin critic leaned forward. "This has Biennale potential," he said. The others nodded. And for the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who saw the value in what we had built. Not despite where we came from, but because of it. Later that night, Daniel found me alone by the railing. "Your husband is exceptional," he said, "but I think you knew that long before anyone else." "I did," I replied. "Thank you for seeing it too." On our last evening, I did something I almost never do. I posted on Instagram. My account was small, maybe 200 followers. I hadn't posted in months. But that night, as the sun dipped into the Mediterranean and the water turned gold, Ethan stood behind me, his arms wrapped around my shoulders, and I wanted to remember it. Not for them. For me. The photo showed us at the front of the yacht. I was wearing a white silk dress I had found in a small boutique in Nice. Ethan's chin rested lightly on my shoulder. The Monaco coastline blurred softly behind us. On the table beside us, a glass of champagne, and just barely visible, the Langford Gallery catalog with his name on the cover. I wrote the caption in seconds. "Honeymoon with my husband. Grateful for the people who showed up." No tags, no explanation. Just the truth. I posted it at 9 p.m. local time. Then I put my phone away, kissed Ethan goodnight, and fell asleep to the sound of water against the hull. The next morning, I reached for my phone without thinking. The screen was full. Notifications stacked on top of each other. I scrolled, and kept scrolling. 417 missed calls and messages. The same people who couldn't send one message on my wedding day suddenly had a lot to say. 417. Let that number sit for a moment. The same family who couldn't send a single message on my wedding day suddenly had hundreds of things to say when they saw where I was. I sat on the edge of the bed and started scrolling. Slowly, like reading something clinical, detached. My father had called 23 times, 11 messages. First, "Tessa. Whose yacht is that then? Call me." Then, I didn't know Ethan was doing this well. And finally, late in the night, "Please call your dad." My mother. 18 calls, 9 messages. "Oh my God. Tessa. Is that Monaco? Are you okay? Whose boat is that? And then, of course, we should celebrate when you get back. Celebrate. The same woman who didn't send one congratulations now wanted a party. Vanessa. 7 calls. 3 messages. Wait. What is Ethan actually selling his art? And then, we need to talk. The rest came in waves. Aunts, uncles, cousins, people I hadn't heard from in years. Congratulations. So proud of you. We always knew Ethan was talented. The same people who chose not to come, now rewriting the past. At the very bottom. One message stood out. Caleb. He had never texted me before. Is your husband represented by a gallery I'd like to connect? The man who once defined my family's loyalty, now trying to reach Ethan through me. I read everything. I didn't reply to a single message. An hour later, Ethan found me on the balcony. My phone sat face down on the table. He didn't ask. He already knew. I won't ignore them forever, I said quietly. But I'm not pretending this is okay. That afternoon, I opened the family group chat for the first time since muting it. I typed a message, rewrote it, then sent it. Thank you for reaching out. Ethan and I are doing well. For those asking, he signed a major art contract weeks ago. The yacht belongs to his collector. Our trip was a gift. I paused, then continued. I won't pretend your absence on June 14th didn't hurt. It did. Dad promised to walk me down the aisle and didn't. Mom chose a party over her daughter's wedding. Vanessa planned her event on the same day knowingly. I'm not angry, but I need space. When I'm ready, I'll reach out. I put the phone away. For 4 hours. Nothing. I imagined them reading it together. Quiet, uncomfortable. At 8 that evening. My father called. I didn't answer. An hour later, Vanessa posted on Instagram a photo of a perfectly set dinner table, warm lighting, wine glasses. The caption read, "Family dinner. Missing one," as if I had been the one who didn't show up. Some people never stop rewriting the story, even when the truth is already obvious. 3 weeks after we returned, Langford Gallery released the official announcement. Ethan Blake, the 7th chair. The exhibition spread quickly. Art News, ArtNet, and then the New York Times. The featured painting showed a garden, 42 chairs, 7 filled, 35 empty. Title, June 14th. Price, $120,000. Already sold. People stood in front of it and cried. Opening night. The gallery was full. Collectors, critics, curators. I stood beside Ethan, watching strangers react to a moment that had once broken me. A reporter asked him, "Is this personal?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "Yes," he said. It was our wedding day. 7 guests, 42 chairs. The room went quiet. And by the next morning, the story was everywhere. Someone sent him the article. I never found out who, but I could picture it clearly. My father sitting at the kitchen table in West Hartford, glasses low on his nose, staring at the New York Times on his iPad, looking at that painting, 42 chairs, every empty one painted with the kind of precision that only comes from remembering exactly who didn't show up. My mother called me that same day. Her voice sounded different, fragile. "Tessa, your father saw the painting. He hasn't said a word in hours. He's just sitting there." I stood still. "Mom, I didn't paint it," I said quietly. "Ethan did. He painted what happened." She didn't respond. Vanessa reacted differently. She wasn't hurt. She was angry, not at herself, at being exposed. Within days, people started asking her questions. "Wait, your sister's husband? That's Ethan Blake. Why weren't you at her wedding? Vanessa had spent years building an image, perfect family, perfect life. And suddenly, there was a hole in it, 42 chairs wide. Caleb called Ethan soon after. "Hey, Ethan, congratulations," he said. "I've got a few clients who might be interested in commissioning." Ethan cut him off. Polite, but firm. "I work exclusively through my gallery now. Mr. Hayes and Langford handle everything." The conversation ended there. A few days later, Aunt Margaret sent me a screenshot from the family group chat, the one I had already left. Vanessa had written, "She's doing this to humiliate us. And my father. For the first time in my life." He replied, "Maybe we should have gone to the wedding." My mother answered immediately, "Don't start, Thomas." Even then, even with the truth hanging on a gallery wall for hundreds of people to see, no one said the words that mattered. We were wrong. 2 months later, something else surfaced. A notice in the Connecticut Business Registry. Rhodes Development Group. Chapter 11. Bankruptcy. At first, it was just a line in a report. Then the details came out. 2 failed projects. Loans defaulted. Creditors closing in. The company that once made Caleb untouchable was collapsing. The impact reached my parents quickly. The mortgage payments stopped. $3,200 a month. Gone. My mother's credit card was cut off. Vanessa started selling her jewelry online, pieces she once treated like status symbols. Gone. One by one. My father called me not long after. For the first time since the article. "Tessa, I don't know how to say this." His voice sounded smaller. "We might lose the house. I know I have no right to ask, but is there any way?" I let the silence stretch. The same silence he gave me on my wedding morning. "Dad," I said finally, "I'm going to be honest with you. 6 months ago, you chose Vanessa's party over my wedding. You broke a promise. You let me walk down the aisle with our landlord because showing up for me wasn't worth the drive." I could hear him breathing on the other end. "I'm not saying no," I continued, "but you need to understand something first. I'm not your backup plan. I'm your daughter," I said, my voice steady. "And you treated me like I was optional." He didn't answer right away. The silence stretched. Then, quietly, "You're right. It wasn't enough. But it was something." 2 days later, Vanessa called. It was the first time we had spoken since before the wedding. "I miss you, Tess," she said softly. The nickname. The tone she always used when she wanted something. Then, just as quickly, it shifted. "Caleb lost everything. Mom and Dad need help. You and Ethan are doing well now. Can't we just move past this?" Move past what I asked? My voice wasn't cold, just clear. "You scheduled your baby shower on my wedding day. You called everyone and told them to choose you. You told Dad I could have a wedding any time. Do you remember that?" Silence then. "I was pregnant. Tessa. I was scared. You're being unfair." "No," I said calmly. "You were calculating." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. And that's okay. I continued. "I'm not here to punish you, but I need you to understand something. I see it now. I've always seen it. I just ignored it. Because I wanted a family." Her breathing changed, the control slipping. "I love you," I said. "But I'm not letting love be used against me anymore. If you want a relationship with me, it starts with honesty, not money." She hung up. She didn't call again for 3 weeks. I set my phone down and walked into the studio. Ethan was finishing another painting. A long table, 11 place settings, one chair pulled back slightly, unused. He glanced up. How'd it go? She hung up. He nodded once. She'll call back. Maybe. I said. But she'll be different. Or she won't call at all. Those are the only options I'm accepting. He returned to painting. I picked up my pen. Outside, the sound of crickets filled the air. Steady and indifferent. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of a house that belonged entirely to me, a small 2-bedroom cottage in Westport, 10 minutes from the water, white siding, blue shutters, a wraparound porch. The downstairs had been converted into Ethan's studio. Perfect light, open space, a door leading out to a small garden where I planned to grow lavender. We paid for it ourselves. No mortgage, no help, no one else's name attached to it. Ethan had completed the 7th chair series, 12 paintings, displayed at Langford Gallery for 3 months, almost all of them sold. Over $600,000, and more requests already waiting. Daniel Ashford had offered another commission. 2 European galleries had reached out. My life had changed too. A major children's publisher offered me a multi-book deal after seeing my work at Ethan's exhibition. The first book was about a little girl planting wildflowers in a place where nothing was supposed to grow. I worked on it every morning at the dining table. Ethan painted downstairs. And every Sunday, Mr. Hayes came over for dinner. He'd drive in from New Haven in his old Volvo, bring a simple bottle of wine, and sit with us like he had always belonged there. Because in every way that mattered, he did. One evening, I served roast chicken with herbs from the garden. Mr. Hayes raised his glass. To the 7th chair, he said. Ethan clinked his glass against his. I did the same. 7 people at a wedding, and every one of them still in my life. One afternoon in October, I heard a car pull into the gravel driveway. No one had called. I opened the door. My father was standing there. He was wearing a flannel shirt and khakis. His hands were in his pockets. He looked older than I remembered, not because of time, but because of weight. The kind a person carries when they can't put something down. I didn't come to ask for anything. He said. I waited. I came to say I'm sorry, not the kind that expects forgiveness, the kind that knows it doesn't deserve it. He stood there in the quiet October light, leaves drifting across the porch. I could tell he had practiced those words, not because they were empty, because they mattered. I sat in a country club eating finger sandwiches while my daughter got married with 7 people. He said, I'll carry that for the rest of my life. I know. I replied softly. You can come in? Ethan just made coffee. He stepped inside, slowly, taking in everything. The studio downstairs, the garden through the window, the paintings on the walls, in the hallway. He stopped. A small painting hung beside the coat hooks. June 14th. An early study. 7 chairs filled. 35 empty. He stood there for a long time. Then he reached into the bag he brought and pulled out a frame. Inside was a certificate. Connecticut Statewide Art Award. My name on it. Dated 12 years ago. The paper had faded. I found it in the attic. He said. It should have been on the wall years ago. I took it from him, and I let him stay for coffee. People often ask me if I forgave them. The truth is, forgiveness isn't one moment. It's not something you give and move on. It's something you build. Slowly. Some days you move forward. Some days you stop and question everything. Vanessa eventually sent me a letter. A real one. Handwritten. There was one line in it that mattered. I chose that day on purpose. I was afraid that if your wedding mattered, people would stop needing me. I read it 4 times. Then I folded it and placed it in my desk drawer. Not thrown away. Not displayed. Just kept until I was ready. My mother calls once a week now. She asks about my work. about Ethan's paintings, about the garden. She doesn't ask for anything. It's small, but it's real. Vanessa and Caleb live in a rented apartment now. Caleb started over at another firm. Vanessa found a job too. Her first in years. I heard she's good at it. I hope she is. As for me, I stand on the back porch of a house I paid for myself, watching the light settle over the garden. Ethan is in the studio. I can hear the quiet rhythm of his palette knife. Mr. Hayes will be here soon for dinner. The lavender I planted in the spring has started to bloom. 42 chairs, 7 people, 417 messages. In the end, those numbers don't matter. What matters is this. I stopped counting the people who left and started valuing the ones who stayed. If you were in my place, would you have helped your family after everything they did, or would you have walked away? Do you believe blood should always come first, even when it hurts you? Some people call it loyalty, others call it self-respect. For me, it was the hardest choice I've ever made. What would you choose? If there's one thing this journey taught me, it's that love without respect will slowly erase you. For years, I thought being patient, being understanding, being the easy one would make my family love me more. But all it did was teach them that I would always stay, no matter how I was treated. And the hardest lesson I had to learn was this sometimes. The people you love will not choose you, and you still have to choose yourself anyway. I also learned that family is not defined by blood, but by presence, by who stands beside you when it matters most. 7 people showed up to my wedding, and for a long time, I thought that meant I was lacking something. But I see it differently now. Those 7 people were my truth. They were the ones who chose me without hesitation, without conditions. And in the end, that mattered more than a room full of people who were only there out of obligation. There's a quiet kind of strength in walking away from what hurts you. Even when it's familiar, it doesn't mean you don't care. It means you finally care about yourself too. Setting boundaries isn't revenge, it's healing. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is stop explaining your worth to people who refuse to see it. If you've ever felt overlooked, replaced, or treated like you were optional, I want you to know this. You are not too much. You are not enough. You were just in a place that couldn't see your value, and that's not where your story ends. Right now, wherever you are, take a deep breath. Maybe step outside for a few minutes, or make yourself a warm cup of tea, or simply sit in silence and give yourself permission to rest. You've carried more than people realize. You deserve that pause. And if this story meant something to you, if it made you feel seen even for a moment, I gently ask you to subscribe, like, and share this video. Not for me, but for the next person who might be going through something similar and hasn't found the words yet. Your one click could help this story reach someone who needs it more than you know. It could help them feel less alone. It could help them choose themselves. So if you're still here, thank you, truly. And if you're ready, be part of something meaningful, because sometimes the smallest action can create the biggest change.